sharing knowledge about Eretz Israel. Thank you for choosing to start your morning listening to it and learning together. I'm going to share my screen and we will get started. Okay. The Gemara Masachet Sanhedrin says every city that doesn't have these specific 10 things, a Talmid Chacham is not allowed to live in it. So it's an interesting question to ask ourselves. What does the Gemara say are 10 essential things that every single city needs to have in order for Talmid Chacham to live there? So here are 10 boxes with questions, and we're going to go over the 10, and then we're going to see how it connects to what we're going to learn today. So the first thing every city needs is a bet din. They need a court. They need a charity fund so they can help the poor people of the community. They need a shul, a bathhouse, which means a shower, a bathroom, toilet, a doctor, mekiz dam. And mekiz dam is something that doesn't exist today, but back then they believed this part of health that you needed to just occasionally take blood from your body. So they had someone that would do that. A scribe to write contracts, ketuvot, wills, a butcher, and a teacher. Now, okay. In the city that we're going to learn about today, they had one thing that was way better than all the other ones and way better in all of the cities. And this is what drew the people to this city. The city we're going to learn about is Bet Shearim. And Bet Shearim had a teacher that was so unbelievable that everyone wanted to be a part of the city. Who was that teacher? What was so unbelievable about him? Do we know him? Do we want to know him? So that's what one of the things we're going to see today. And our first question is, what famous personality is connected to Bet Shearim? How has burial changed over time? And why is Bet Shearim a UNESCO World Heritage Site? So these are the things that we're going to address. Where is Bet Shearim? Now, I've been there 3 times. You see on the map, it's about 2 hours from Jerusalem. It's all the way up north near the Carmel Mountains. And after I learned about it and went there, I was so excited. I was asking everyone I know, did you ever hear Bet Shearim? Did you ever go to Bet Shearim? And very surprising to me, there were a lot of Israelis that never heard of Bet Shearim, a lot of Israelis that never went to Bet Shearim, and I'm all so excited by this. So do you know it's a World Heritage Site? And they never heard of it before. So after learning about it, I hope to put Bet Shearim on the map for you if it's not, and that your next trip to Israel, Be'ezrat Hashem, which is soon, you take a trip there, because I think it is so fascinating. The only example of a big organized trip I know of ever going there is I with Joey Mizrahi years ago, I led a father-son trip, and I said, Joey, we need to go to Bet Shearim, and we went there, and everyone had a great time. So, okay, I'm going to get into what it is. A lot of money. Let's say someone told you, every single day of your life, I'm going to give you this amount of money. You never have to work. You never have to worry. What would you do with all your time? Now, I think maybe this is also a challenge that affects rich people that have so much that they don't need to work. What do you do with your free time? And in Bet Shearim, there lived a man who was the famous teacher, that this is exactly his predicament. He was so rich, he had maids and beautiful house and paintings on the wall and everything you could imagine. And what does he do with his free time? So what he decided to do with his free time is he looked around at the community around him and he said, the Jewish world as I know it is going to be destroyed slowly but surely. All the knowledge that we have is going to be forgotten. And so I need to write it down. This is what I need to do with my free time. And it wasn't that free. He was very busy managing all of his properties. But this man was known as Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And what Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi decided to do is he wanted to take Torah Sheba'al Peh and write it down. The way Torah works, we have Torah Shebichtav and Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah Shebichtav is the written Torah, the 5 books, Bereshit, Shemot, Vayikra, Bamidbar, Devarim. And Torah Sheba'al Peh is what we have today, which is the Mishna and the Gemara. And we were it's a law that you're not able to write it down. It's Ba'al Peh for a reason. You pass it down, father to son, it stays fresher. But Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi realized that if he doesn't write it down, it's going to be lost. And that's this huge undertaking that he took to sit and organize all this knowledge and write it down. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, he lived in Bet Shearim. And here we have in a street in Israel named after him. Now, when you come to Bet Shearim, this is before, so Bet Shearim now is this organized national park. Beforehand, this is a little bit outside. You come to this big stone structure. Now, what is it? The sign right in front says Bet Knesset, but I'm going to prove to you that it's not a Bet Knesset. It's not a shul. So let's start looking a little bit through this building. Now, how do archaeologists know what it is? There's different clues that help them. And in doing so, I want to tell you a little bit more about Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's life. There's really these like fascinating, like small facts that after you hear them, you're going to remember them because they're very interesting and strange. So if we go explore this big stone structure, one of the things we're going to see is this. Now, what's your immediate gut reaction when you see this? You see a hole in the ground. Your immediate gut reaction might be that it's a toilet. If that's what it is, you are correct. This is an ancient toilet, and one of the reasons why they know is because a lot of times, one of the things that's not here is it's not plastered. Back in the day when they used to have water in, let's say, a pit, and they want to save it, they plaster the wall so the water doesn't seep in, but here they don't want to save it. So here we have a toilet in this structure, and now I want to share with you a very interesting line in the Gemara. Ezehu ashir. So most people fill this out and say, Ezehu ashir hasameach bechalko. Who is someone that's rich? Someone that's content with what they have, because that's the popular answer. And that's one of the answers given. But another fascinating answer given is, who is someone that's rich? Anyone that has a toilet close to his house. Anyone that has a toilet in his house, which means based on these terms, we're all rich because we have more than one toilet. And here's a fact I want to share about Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And all these facts are from the Mishna, Gemara, sources of Chazal. Is Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi had stomach issues and very bad stomach problems. And when he would go to the bathroom, it was hard for him. It would make a lot of noise and doesn't want people to hear. So what's one way to drown out the noise? Well, something that had a lot then was animals. And animals would make a lot of noise. And right next to this area with the toilet, they actually found what they believe to be horse stables. So this man standing over here, his name is Dr. Chagi Amitzur. He's the one that taught me all of this and took me around Shearim when I was in the tour guiding course. And what he's standing next to over here, where's my mouse? They believe that this is where like the horses would be, and the toilet was over there. Here's the horse stables. So one, to even have horses, you need to be rich. To have a toilet in your house, you certainly need to. They also, archaeologists determined, based on looking at the rocks and the pillars, that it was 2 stories high, which means rich. They found also a bathhouse for bathing. And another thing about Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is he's called an istanis, which means he needed to be clean all the time. So he always needed to bathe. And something else, which maybe when I mentioned earlier that there's a sign that says Bet Knesset, but it's really not Bet Knesset. And if you Google it, it'll come up as Bet Knesset, but it's really not, at least according to Dr. Chagi Amitzur, it's not. In the 1936 to 1940, they did digs nearby, and they actually found a shul a little bit near this, and then they had to cover it back up because the British had a law then, you can't make any changes to the ground. And now if you put all of this together, the Chazal also mentioned that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi had a shul near his house. So putting all these facts, adding them up, is this the house of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi? Are you able to walk into the house where the man who compiled the Mishna lived? Very possibly. And just walking in a house where someone that great lived. And I think if someone went with a group, they could take out a Mishnah and learn connected Mishnayot, and then you're learning what the person who lived there was. I think that's like a fascinating thing to do. Is it the house of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi? According to Dr. Chagi Amitzur, it is. So that's one thing I want to share with you about Bet Shearim. Another thing I want to share, I don't know if you've ever thought about this or ever learned it. I want to talk about burial throughout the centuries. And the reason why I'm discussing burial is because what we're going to see in a few minutes, one of the main attractions in Bet Shearim is their necropolis, which is where the dead was buried. That's like a very, I'm going to use the word cool because it is cool, that's like one of the main attractions, so to speak, of Bet Shearim. So here we have a man that dies. How is he going to be buried? So today, if he's buried in the ground. Back then, what they would do is they had something, these stone slabs, they're called a mishkav, and they would put the dead body on the stone slab. And after a year, what would be left is the bones. And they would come collect the bones, and they would put it into this, here, bones left, pit called a ma'asefa. And that is how they buried in the time of the first Beit HaMikdash. And this also helps give you an understanding to a phrase used all the time in Chumash. So before I say the phrase, you see there's more than one mishkav. You could bury more than one person in the same cave. Also, once you collect the bones, you could put another one. And usually what they would do is they could collect the bones from people in the same family and put it in the same pit, which would be underneath. And there's a phrase that's used a lot in the Chumash, Ne'esaf el avotav. That's how it says someone dies. He's gathered to his fathers. Now, it's a very nice poetic way to say that you're dying because you're being gathered to your fathers, but it's literally being gathered to your fathers because they're taking the bones and they're putting it all together with the rest of your family. So that's how burial used to be. Why? Now, the way burial had to do with the beliefs of the time. And the reason why was because in the first temple period, they believed that Techiyat HaMetim, revival of the dead, was something collective. You would do it together with your family. So that's why they collected it all together. So that's the first temple. I know, I also loved it when I heard it. It was like, that makes so much sense. Second temple period, there's a change because the belief is different. What they do is they bury the body in something called a kuch. You see here, they have tons of caves in Israel that they found. You put the body inside and then you cover it with a stone. After a year, you collect the bones again. And except this time, you don't put it in a pit underneath. You put it in something called a gus kema. And you see that the box is small because they're just putting the bones in. Now, it's enough for one person. And what's the belief here? The belief there was that everyone would be judged on their own. It's not collective Techiyat HaMetim, everyone on their own merit, so you don't all need to be together. Then it changes again. In the time of the Mishna and the Talmud, people were buried in something called the sarcophagus, which in Greek means eats flesh. And they would take the body, it's enough for one person, the entire body, and put it in. And the reason why they did that is because after the Bar Kokhba revolted, in the time of the Romans, they were afraid people are dying, we're under Roman leadership. What if no one's around to collect the bones after a year? And based on their belief, if the bones are not collected after a year, you're not buried. And of course, they want to bury the dead. So they said, okay, let's, they said, let's put people in the sarcophagus because you don't need to do any transferring. You put the body in and that's it. Now you see that this one is made out of stone. They were made out of different materials. They were made out of wood. The reason why we have the ones of stone is because that's really, you need to be much richer because it's very expensive. You need to carve it. And we're going to talk about later how people could spend their whole lives designing the sarcophagus for themselves because some of them are very intricate and detailed. And the rich people could afford stone ones, the poorer ones couldn't. And there was always burial in the ground for those that couldn't afford any of this. So the ones we have today are mostly stone because that was preserved better. Then we have another development. In the time of Galut Babel, the Babylonian Exile, people had a problem. There were no caves. Now the sarcophagi, they were put into caves. Now in Babel, there's not so many caves and they need to come up with another solution. And they say also the sarcophagus is very heavy. And if they bury the body in one, how is the body going to get to Israel? Because the belief, and they want the bodies ultimately to get to Israel, but if it's in this big stone sarcophagus, how is it going to get there? And that's where the belief of Gilgul HaMetim develops, and that, I don't know so much about it, but in one sentence, it's that your body is going to somehow roll to Eretz Yisrael, and they said, okay, if that's going to happen, then we need to put the body in the ground. So was the new way, and today, that's the way we bury today. So we see that there was a huge development, and it's interesting to think about because it's a very, very sensitive topic. God forbid if you lose someone and what you do with the body after, and to see that it changed over time and there were different beliefs and different approaches, it gives you a greater understanding and It also helps us understand history and how things are done. Here are examples of 3 sarcophagi. And you see here, there's lines carved onto one. Here we have an eagle carved. And in this one, you see that there's even a menorah. These are all from caves in Bet Shearim. Bet Shearim has dozens of burial caves, some that are still not even uncovered, and has hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of sarcophagi. When I took a group there, so I had a group of young boys. I said, how do you get young boys interested? What do you do? So I said, okay, we're going to play a game. I want to see how many animals you could find, how many Jewish symbols could you find. And it really is, it's not spooky. It's just a fun, it's a cool experience. You're walking in the cave. Now, I'm also going to add in, this I was going to say later, but I'll say now, there's no bones because the bones over time, animals took them and scattered them throughout. So there's no bones in the cave at all. And how the bones get out, so that I'm going to remember to say later. So it's a nice experience. You don't really feel the death connection because of the way they lit it up and because of the way the things are, but that is how they were buried in the time of the Mishna and the Talmud. Now, there's sarcophagi from all over, from Caesaria, Tzipori, Tyre, Beirut, Antiochya, and we learned that people traveled a great distance to get here, and there's inscriptions in all different languages. Now, why here? Why do people want to come all the way here to be buried? So the Chazal say, Kol hakavod be'eretz Yisrael ki'ilu kavod tachat mizbeach. Anyone buried in Israel, it's like he's buried under the mizbeach, and everyone wants that. Now, if so, why not Jerusalem? And people, one of the number one spots they want to be buried today is Har HaZitim, because Har HaZitim is looking over Har HaBayit, and the belief is that Tchiyat HaMetim will happen from there. So if these people are making all the effort to come all the way to Eretz Yisrael, why are they coming to Bet Shearim? Why not Jerusalem? And the answer is because Yerushalayim, at that time when Bet Shearim was being used, end of the 2nd and beginning of the 3rd centuries, it was a pagan city. They weren't allowed to go into Yerushalayim. So they said, okay, let's go to the next place. Let's go to the city where we have Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. We want to be close to him. So that's why people were brought there. Now, I said a second ago, let's go to where Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is. The very, very strong belief based on Chazal and based on archaeology is that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is buried in Bet Shearim. Now, how do we know that? How can we prove that that is in fact true? So there are many ways, and why we think he's buried here, how we know that he's buried here. And I want to tell you a story first that's written in the Gemara. Friday morning, year 224. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is sick in bed. He's in pain. He's about to die, and he's writing vigorously. He's writing until his last minute. Outside of his house are all the rabbis who are saying Tehillim and praying and praying and praying because they do not want their teacher, their master, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, to go. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's maid, she looks outside and she sees that they're all praying and praying and praying. And in the meantime, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, he's writhing in pain. And she realizes that God is not taking his neshama because of the tefillah. And she wants to just bring him out of his misery. So how is she going to do that? This is a very creative idea what she did. She went up to the roof, she took a clay jug, and she broke it. And what's your immediate reaction when you hear something break? You turn around, you look at the noise, you want to hear what it is. So for a split second, everyone stopped praying because they were attracted to the noise. And in that second that they stopped, his neshama, he died and his neshama went up. Now, how do we tell everyone that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi died? Now, the Chachamim said, whoever says Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi died, we're going to kill him. Now, another rabbi then, Rabbi Eliezer HaKapad, he goes into the house, or maybe he was in the house already and he sees what happened. And what's he going to do now? He's not going to tell them that they died because they said whoever says is going to be killed. So they come to him and they ask him, did he die? So I don't remember the exact line, but in Hebrew, but what he tells them basically in English is that the angels were fighting in the sky and one group won. And then they say, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi died? And he says, you said that, not me. Meaning you were the ones that said that sentence, and he died. And what they then did is they took a very long, I wanted to show you on a map. I forgot to put the map, but It's 10 miles, and you could Google it and see the distance. The Gemara says, Rabbi mutal b'Tzipori u'makom uchana b'bet Shearim. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, he spent the last 17 years of his life in a place called Tzipori, but he wanted to be buried in Bet Shearim. He wrote in his will, I want to be buried in Bet Shearim. So now he does it on a Friday morning, and they have to do preparations to the body, and they have a long journey to get to Bet Shearim, and it's Shabbat, and what are you going to do? So the Chachamim also write in the Yerushalmi, that there were miracles that were done that day. Because what happened? They took Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi's body around the different shuls in Tzipori, which takes time. Then they made the 10-mile journey to Bet Shearim, buried him, went back home, prepared for Shabbat, and the sun was still up in the sky. That they said, Kadosh Baruch Hu, he was, I'll say the opposite. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi had such a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu stopped the sun, and the sun did not set until they were done with his preparations for his funeral. So that is one way we know that Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is buried in Bet Shearim, because he says he wanted to. That's what the Gemara tells us. Now, there's a few more details which prove to us that that is where he is buried. So to do that, we're going to need to open his will. What other requests did his will contain other than being buried in Bet Shearim? So he said 3 things. 1, I want a simple burial in the ground. 2, he says Shimon, Gamliel, and Hanina should continue my legacy. 3, 30 days after I die, please learn Torah above my burial cave. So these are the 3 things that he says. What do we find when we explore in Bet Shearim? There is one cave that doesn't have sarcophagi in it. Instead, it has 2 very simple burials in the ground. The Yehuda Hanasi says, Teheh Aroni kivura nekuva ba'aretz. I want my Aron, I want to be in the ground. I want very, very simple. Why are there 2? One for him and one for his wife. And we go into this cave, and this is one of the things that we find, which is exactly like he described. This is the only one that has it. All the other caves have tons of sarcophagi. Very, very simple. What else do we find if we go in the cave? So he said, Shimon, Gamliel, and Hanina. Shimon and Gamliel were his children. Hanina was a student. Should be rule after me. Should continue my legacy. And what we found in the cave, now this isn't the original, but they found inscribed on the cave the 3 names of these people, Shimon, Gamliel, and Hanina. They have with an Aleph Hanina, which is another suggestion as to the fact that this is the burial cave of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And another thing, which I think I like the best of the whole story. And I think when I ask myself, what's the message I get from Bet Shearim and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi in his whole life, I think maybe it's this. Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says, En osim nefashot l'tzadikim devrehem hem zichronam. We don't make memorials for the tzaddikim. The way we remember them is by what they said. And he requested that people learn Torah above his burial cave. And you can't see it now because it's all dirt, so maybe this is an older picture, but they actually found benches right over here. For what? Possibly benches for the people to learn Torah for 30 days after he died. So if we put it all together, we have very simple burial. We have the 3 names, and we have the benches, which could be from teaching Torah. And Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi saying he wants to be buried in Bet Shearim. Most likely, this is the burial cave of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, and you are able to visit where he was buried. Now, like I mentioned in the other cave, there's no bones. We don't know where the bones are. I'm going to still address what happened to all the bones. And like you would think, it's this big heavy metal slab where the bones go. So I'm going to talk about that still. I want to mention now, if you noticed, the door has a very, very interesting design. And I think if someone didn't tell me that this is a burial cave, I wouldn't know that it is. It looks like the entrance to someone's house, like a nice entranceway. You see a big courtyard, and actually a lot of the burial caves, so this is just one, and there's many others in Bet Shearim, they had big courtyards because that's where the funeral would take place. And it's on purpose that they designed it that it shouldn't look like a cemetery, but they wanted it to look like someone's house, because back then they believed that there was a very big connection between life and death, and you were continuing on. It wasn't these like 2 separate things. It was a continuation. And even in the design of it, we see that idea. that if we look at the door, so this over here is a knocker, to literally knock on a door. Like you want to knock on the door of someone's house, you have a knocker. And what you have over here, these circles, so what they are is back then when they had doors, so they were made out of wood, usually not of stone, and they would have metal like on it. They would have these metal nails that was attaching the wood, and in order to artistically display how when you go to someone's door and you would see the nails sticking out, they even made circles here to look like the nails. So they really, really wanted to make it look like a house and to illustrate the connection between life and death and how it's not these two separate things, it's just continuing on. So that's also something very unique and interesting that you could notice about the doors. I want to now talk about, I want to talk about other things that you'll see when you visit Bet Shearim. So you could learn so much from inscriptions that you see on the sarcophagi. One of them, I want to share one with you. It says, here they lie, Atio, the daughter of Rabbi Gamliel, son of Nehemiah, who died a virgin at the age of 22, and Atio, the daughter of Rabbi Yehuda, son of Rabbi Gamliel, that died at the age of 9 and 6 months. So one, the Gemara actually discusses, are two people allowed to be buried in the same sarcophagi? And here we see that they were in fact buried in the same one. We are talking about girls. It points out one died a virgin. There's actually 150 inscriptions that mention the word virgin. So apparently it was something significant for them to mention. And notice how they're both girls, but they only talk about the one that's 22, that she's a virgin. And the one that's 9 and 6 months, they don't mention it because 22 is an age where you could already be married and 9 is not. Also, I want to point out the names. That the names of the fathers are Hebrew, Gamliel, Nehemiah, Yehuda, but Ation, they're Greek names. So we see the influence from other cultures. And this is just from reading one inscription. So imagine how much you can learn from all of them and different languages, also from the way they're decorated. A lot of the decorations that you see, you would ask it, you look at it and say, how can they do these kind of things? Isn't it avodah zarah? You see pictures of lions and bulls and all kinds of things. And I think there's a lot of different approaches. And one that I want to do is zoom on this topic, because the shuls you walk into from the times in Mishna and the Gemara, and what you see inscribed on the floor is all these gods and goddesses and what's it called? The mazalot, the astrology. And you're like, what do you mean? How are you putting this in a shul? So the approach of rabbis back then was different than it is now. So that I just want to talk about at a different time, but that's a great conversation you could have with the people when you're in Bet Shearim looking around and looking at this. There's so many different topics you talk about just from exploring. Now, I want to mention a business that was very popular in Bet Shearim. One of the things they found was tons and tons of pieces of broken glass. Why broken glass? So Bet Shearim was a city where not in the city, but outside of the city, where they buried dead people. And the bodies smell, especially since it took, let's say, 1 to 2 weeks for the body to get there. Now, the sarcophagi are usually very, very big, much bigger than a person's body. Why? One, a lot of times artists would make them in advance, and they don't know how big the body is going to be. Or another reason is because the body, it swells and it gets bigger, so you need more room. And when the people would bring it to Bet Shearim, they would want it to smell better. So they found broken pieces of bottle, which they believe was from perfume, to make it smell nice. Now, why glass and not clay? Because perfume is very expensive, and we can't waste even a drop, let it get absorbed into the walls. So that's also another thing, that if you go to Bet Shearim, they took one of the caves and they transported into a whole explanation about this perfume business. So they found a way to make a little bit of business off of it. And this is the last one I want to talk about, which I mentioned earlier. Here's another sarcophagus. Over here, you see an eagle. I think I showed this one before, and you see an ox over here, different animals. Now, Yechezkel, he mentions the throne of God, and he talks about different animals that are on the sides of it. So there's a lot of that in the prophecies too. And seeing it in the sarcophagi is not necessarily that they're getting from the pagan world. It can also be that they're relying on Chizkiah's prophecy, or maybe not. There's a lot of suggestions as to what it is. So I want you to notice over here that there's a hole. Why is there a hole in the sarcophagus? When was it from? Who made it? I could tell you that when the person was buried inside, it was not there, because that would defeat the whole purpose. If there's a hole in it, they want to be sealed. But what happened is there were a lot of grave robbers that would come, because one of the traditions they had in the Roman world was that everyone would be buried with a golden coin, because they believed that when they died, they would have to cross a river and to get to the other world, and they would have to pay the fare with a gold coin. So they did not know that Jewish people don't have that belief. They said, hey, here's an opportunity to get tons and tons of golden coins. And that's why they're broken, because of looters that wanted to come and find gold. And this brings me to the next point of why there's no bones in there. So it could be, maybe they threw out bones, but I think a definitely logical answer would be, what are animals going to do? Animals like bones. There's opening, a way to get the bones. The animals come and take them and scatter them around. Now, it's such a painful thought for me to think that you have to be with Hanasi's bones and either someone threw them out or animals took them, but we don't know where they are physically, and we know he was buried in Beit Shearim for all the reasons I mentioned, but that is why there's holes in many of the sarcophagi. The last point, the third question we wanted to answer was about the World Heritage Site. So there's this branch of the United Nations called UNESCO, the United Nations Educational, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. And what they want to do is they want to encourage preservation of sites that are of outstanding value to humanity. And in July 2015, which is not long ago, 6 years ago, Beit Shearim was considered a National Heritage Site. So whenever I hear this, it reminds me of the 7 wonders of the world, and who would not want to go see that one? So who would not want to go see what's on this National Heritage Site? Israel has 16 to date. So just to give you some context, if that's a lot or little, I like thinking it's a lot, because in this little small country, we have 16. Oh, wow. I did a Google search, and in total, there are 1,121 across 167 countries, and the winners that have the most are Italy and China with 55 each. So 16 is not so far behind, and think of how big Italy and China are compared to Israel. So Beit Shearim, other than it being the place of Rabbi Hanasi and it being special and interesting, and you learn about different traditions, it's also has the world stamp of coolness. I'd like to summarize now what we spoke about today. So we opened with the 10 necessities for a city to have in order for Talmid Chacham to live there. And we said one of them is a teacher. And Beit Shearim prided itself on the best teacher, that they had a Yehuda Hanasi living there. We looked at his house, which we said the sign calls the shul. We said there is a shul, but nearby. And according to Dr. Chagi Amitzud, based on the things that we saw, and I know it was hard to see it from the pictures, so you have to come visit in person to get a better view. We said we found a toilet and stables and a shower, and there were 2 floors, which is the mark of a rich person. The Yehuda Hanasi was extremely, extremely rich, and he was also very loved by the authorities. We spoke about burial practices over the years, how it changed from collective burial, taking the bones, putting it underneath in a pit, to the burial that we have today, which is burial in the ground, and that was connected to a person's belief. The Yehuda Hanasi's death, which is mentioned that he wasn't dying, and then the maid came and she broke a clay jug so his neshama would go up to the sky. We spoke about his will, that he wanted a simple burial. He wanted his sons and student to carry on his legacy, and he wanted people to learn Torah. And that was what was important to him, that people are not going to sit and mourn his death. They're going to continue on what he started. There are hundreds of sarcophagi found. We just tip of the iceberg, what we did today in terms of what there is to see. There's tons of burial caves. I have not even gone into all of them because there's just so many of them. The business of the dead, got the perfume, the grave robbers, which is the reason why there's a hole in some of them. And we mentioned that it was a UNESCO site. So this is a lot that we learned, a lot to think about. And I mentioned earlier, and I'm going to repeat it, I think the message I get from Beit Shearim, and something I want to leave you with to think about, is one, really in a positive kind of way, is how I'm spending my time, because Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was a busy man, and he was able to compile the Mishna and put it together. And I asked myself, on my small level, what could I do? I also asked myself if I'm continuing what Yehuda Hanasi started, that he taught Mishna and he wanted to continue the Jewish world. I asked myself my role in that continuation. And on a less grand scale, it's just a nice place to go and to think about different traditions and be connected to a place of the past. And I like walking where Yehuda Hanasi was alive and dead. And I encourage you all to go and visit Bet Shearim. It's a wonderful place. Thank you so much for being here. If anyone has any questions, I'm more than happy to answer.
Adele, thank you.
Thank you very much. I went to Beit Shearim and Tzipori, and I have to tell you that the guy did not tell me anything about his stomach problems or the toilet next to the horse stables. So it was very interesting. Thank you so much. Are we having a shir next week before Pesach?
I have to ask the SCI. I think we weren't even supposed to have, maybe Vivian was, we weren't supposed to have one this week. And then they said, do you want one? I said, yeah.
Yes, yes.
So the same with me. They asked me and I said I may as well teach since I was around. Next week I'm not around, but if you're around, I'm happy to come to listen. I'll do my Haggalah with you in the background.
Right. So I don't know. I have to ask the SCI, like I'm around.
Where are we going? Where's our next trip? That's my question. I'm so excited.
Thank you. So Lisa, I'll email you. Or you could sign on, and if there's class, there's class. If not, there's not. I don't really know. I have to
follow. If she follows the SCA sends out every week, every day actually. It'll send it out. If you're on that schedule, then we'll know you have class.
Okay, Elisa, is that how you know about them anyway?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so thank you, Vivian. So you can.
How is Ralph Beta related to you? You have like such a nice relationship. I love it.
Oh, so believe it or not, he was the first bar mitzvah trip I ever guided. So it's my relationship from the bar mitzvah trip, which was over 2 years ago.
So you're not related. You just
not at all.
Oh, very nice. You're a great guide. You're a great tour guide. You make us feel like we're there in person.
Thank you. Oh, what a compliment.
Thank you. Have a great
Thanks again. Happy holiday. It was fabulous.
Happy holiday. Thank you, Vivian.
Take care.
Bye.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. So nice to see you again.
Bye. See you next time.
Bye, Ralph.